There we are.
Okay.
And I'll turn it over to you guys and let you chat a little bit about your experiences, and then relay the questions in the chat as they pop up. So thank you for joining us.
Well,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. I thought first that what I would do a little bit of my background, because you might know what I've done more recently, but just to know where I'm coming from, and then I thought then Noel can chime in and tell you her background and the development, because I think part of what's sort of interesting about the two different backgrounds is it reflects where the sport, in a lot of ways, it reflects where the sport is and was. And when I say was, I mean was 50 some odd, more than 50 years ago, but who's counting? Some of you may know I am a native New Englander. I grew up in New Hampshire, was a very early member of NEDA, and through most of my early years, I really enjoyed being a member of NEDA. I always had come up through the Pony Club, which is a bit misleading. I spent many years in Pony Club, didn't really achieve any rating above C2, but that was my background, with a little bit of dressage, a little bit of eventing, a little bit of show jumping, and a little bit of hunters when I was very young, because that's what you did. But dressage was always my real interest and love. After graduating from high school, I went to Germany and to ride at a true riding school, which is nowadays very hard to find. A riding school, Egon von Neindorf's Wright Institute, which was quite an experience. And I came back from there. I was a working student for Major Carmona in New Jersey, and ended up working with Carl Makolka, as he was recommended to me actually by Egon von Neindorf himself, when I asked him, when I come back to the States, who I should work with. At that point in his career, Carl happened to be in Massachusetts. So it worked out quite well for me to start riding with him. But then in January of 1981, I followed him to Temple Farms in Illinois, and worked under him and alongside him for almost 20 years. So I had to feel that in a lot of ways he was my mentor. I do feel that I had sort of three major instructors, but I also think Carl being one of them, that had, when I say major, that had a major impact on me. I would say Carl definitely was one of them. Egon von Neindorf certainly had an impact on me, and more recently, Klaus Balkenhol had a major impact on me. But I left Temple Farms in 2000. I had woke up one day and thought I always wanted to ride in the Olympics. That had been my goal. And I woke up one day and realized that, when 4 Olympics have come and gone, and you're looking at the 5th one, and you haven't really pursued it, that you either have to pursue it, you have to either change what you're doing and pursue it, or just give up the dream. So I left Temple at that time to really try to pursue doing something internationally. And that's when I happened to come across where I could have Rocher, the horse that you mentioned, and be able to compete her and compute some other horses for the Smith family in Columbus, Ohio area. And so I was able to compete at the World Cup finals in Gothenburg, in Aachen, as a team member in Aachen, and in Hickstead, Wiesbaden, and a number of indoor competitions in Germany, such as Oldenburg, Dortmund, and Munich. But then since 2014, I've really been focused on our own business, Williams Dressage. And then in 2015, I was named as the USEF youth coach. So that's a very quick summary of my background, how I got to be what I'm doing from the riding training point of view. But Noel, maybe you should give a little bit, as you came up in a very different background.
I did. But I would like to point out, I believe the Pony Club rating system is different now, right? When you went through, you had to go through, do everything, whereas now you can get your B and A in different things, right?
I believe that's true. Yes.
So as you underplay your Pony Club experience, maybe it will be a little different today. So I don't know if any of you know me, but obviously I am his daughter. So we have a similar path in the sense that I grew up at Temple Farms. So I was fortunate enough to be long-reined on a Lipizzan stallion doing all of the Grand Prix movements when I was 2 years old. And I was much more interested in my stirrup coming off my foot than I was the horse pirouetting underneath me. But I was fortunate enough to be able to experience that and ride that and experience schoolmasters like that as, you know, when I was 10 years old. And then I had a pony who I, you know, took around the steeplechase course, not over the jumps, but we just galloped around forever. And my parents were my instructors. I think I did a little bit of jumping, like at another barn, but not really. I didn't particularly care for it. I'm afraid of heights, so jumps were not for me. And I distinctly remember I had to have been, I don't know, 10, 11, no, younger than that, at the house before Martindale, before I was third grade. I remember being in the playroom and thinking that I wanted to ride in the Olympics one day. And well, I wanted to be the best, and the best is the Olympic. And the Olympics, you have eventing, dressage, and jumping. And I don't really like jumping, so eventing and jumping are out. So dressage it was. And that's when I apparently decided that's what I wanted to do. So anyway, then when I was 12, we moved to Ohio, and I rode, I don't know, like maybe like some other schoolmasters, and we sold my first horse. So I still rode with my parents. I think I clinicked maybe with Tom Noon once on one of their horses. And then when I did juniors, I rode a stallion by the name of Pico. And so I went off to New Jersey and rode him a little bit. But at the same time, I was actually still with my parents in Ohio. I just kind of like went on weekends and such. And then when I was in Ohio, I would ride my mom's horse, her Grand Prix horse. So I had more schoolmasters to ride then. And we did very well at juniors. Then I moved up to the young rider level with him, but unfortunately was not able to compete him really in the young riders. He had an injury, and then we stepped away from him. So then I leased another schoolmaster, did young riders on that horse. And I was 19. And then after that, I actually went to PSI for a summer, got to ride some of their horses over the summer, and then came back. And then we didn't have a horse. There was no horse for me to ride, except my mom, the project horse that had a little bit of a rearing problem that all of the family members had ridden. So I got to ride him, and my parents had ridden him. I think you guys showed him through third or fourth level. I don't remember.
I showed him. I know I showed him to the third level because he won one of the regional championships one year.
Yeah. I think.
But now you're making it sound like we only put you on difficult horses at rear.
No. That was the difficult one. No, before that, okay. I realized this though, that I made my career on difficult horses, but before that I had schoolmasters, but all of my schoolmasters were before I was, 15. And so, by the time then I was 20, then I got this horse, and he was very much a project horse, and I got him to Pre-St. George, and then got him kind of schooling the Grand Prix. And then I went to college. I think college is very important. So then I graduated and decided I wanted to do this. And I worked for my parents. I ended up getting a lease on a young horse that my dad had competed at the 4-year-old championships, and then at the 5-year-old. So I took over right after the 5-year-old championships. And because he was a lease, I had to pay for him. For the young professional, you're a little strapped for cash. So I didn't go to Florida that first winter, and then decided I needed to go to Florida because over the winter he bucked me off and gave me a concussion. So I realized, no, we need to go to Florida. We need help. So I went to Florida, again, worked for my parents. I groomed. I was not a rider. I was cleaning stalls. I was, truly working student groom. And in the evenings, I worked at restaurants, and I did that for several years. I groomed for other trainers at horse shows. I worked for the Bills. I was a working student for them, for Marcel Vanderberg. And then I went to California for a year, worked as a working student for Meadow Rosencrantz, and then came back. And all this time while I was still grooming, I still kind of had my own business, teaching and starting young horses. And that's when I got all the problem horses. And that's where I say, like, I made my career on difficult horses. I think difficult horses are very important, but I had schoolmasters first. And then now I am a trainer at a breeding farm called Crociador Farm. And now I get to start my young horses, and some we sell and some we keep, and hopefully we'll get to campaign the good ones. So that's my background.
Yeah, and so I think when she went through her background, what was really important to us, there are two things I wanted to mention when I say to us, to her mother and I, is that she really was exposed to other stables, how other stables work. We felt that the working student positions were important, and to see how that works and how other trainers work, to really get a better sense of the business. The other thing I think that's maybe a little bit unique in our family is that we had at least 3 horses that I can think of, top of my head, that have become sort of family horses that each one of us has competed. And I think each one of us has competed. Several of them we've competed at the FEI levels, and one of the ones she's just talking about, the one that she leased, we still have to this day. We end up purchasing him, and Noel really did most of the work to bring him to Grand Prix, but I'm also riding him in the Challenge of the Americas, the breast cancer benefit that's run here in Wellington each year. This will be I don't know how many years now I've ridden him in it. So we do end up sharing the horses that we actually own. Yeah.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have someone asking in the chat already, just kind of the perspective, of moving from the schoolmasters into the more difficult horses. George, did your perspective on training change when you see your child kind of get on these more difficult horses? Did it kind of impact the way you thought about training at all?
That's a very interesting question. I'm more cautious now than I was, that's for sure. And making sure that the groundwork is there, and that there is a rapport established, a better rapport established with the horses before we really do much with them. Noel uses a similar system to start, and we've started, because at Tempel Farms, which those of you that may not be familiar, most of the time when I was there, we had about 100 horses, and in the end, well, I shouldn't say the end, the last 10 years I was there, we opened up one of the barns to be a training barn. So we had roughly 64 horses in training in the whole, in that one complex. And the farm itself is huge, and had horses breeding barns were separate from the riding barns. But anyway, so through that, we started a lot of young horses there as well. So our way of starting them is really making sure that they learn to lunge, and then they learn to carry the equipment on the lunge line, the saddle, and then twist up the bridle and the side reins, and to start them that way, so that they have enough time on the lunge line to develop the strength and to have a sense of how to use their backs and carry them, so they're better prepared to carry a rider, and they have an introduction at least to the contact. So through that, I think over the years, we've refined it more and more. So we know and that the horses really, in general, they're ready to accept the rider. And so we've been more careful, of course, in how we start them. Yeah.
Most of the very difficult horses that I had, he was not around to witness when I got dumped.
Yeah.
There was one, a horse by the name of Whiskey. He was there for that. And I think that changed you a little bit watching Whiskey, because that was the first time you really saw me get launched. The others you didn't see. Yeah.
That
So-
is very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that one, when she was launched on that one, there was nothing she could have done. There's nothing I could have done. It was one of those ones that was totally, and I think what you learn from that, and I have to say over all the years, what you learn is that a lot of times there are physical reasons, of course, why the difficult ones are difficult. And I think one thing that has definitely changed, because I really have been doing this professionally for well over 40 years. So in being very involved as a teenager, so it goes back really 50 plus years, is our what we know about horses and from a veterinary point of view, and what all the different things. So I mean, certainly in those days, you never would have thought of ulcers or or things like EPM or Lyme's disease, or now all even kissing spine wasn't discussed. So there's so many things that can happen, or can happen to a horse, or the issues they may have that really make them so they're not suitable, or they either needed veterinary care. And so I think that's, to me, is that probably the biggest thing in starting on horses. So now when I see one with a real issue, first thing you do is make sure that they are physically in good shape and have the vet care that they need.
I think, as you might expect, I had received some questions from our very, very involved and passionate youth, youth riders. They have questions they would like answers to. So they're curious, the differences in the system for developing young riders in the United States. George, when you came up, you mentioned Pony Club as one example that we've already talked about that's different now. Both of you had different experiences there. Is there more, specific to dressage that you both experienced differently, and the pros and cons of those? Yeah,
what I would say first is one of the big things is, I think, we now call it North American Youth Championships, but it started out as the North American Young Rider Championships. And that was started in, I think the very first one was actually an eventing one in the very late 70s. But when we were at Temple Farms, I think in 1984 was the first one that they hosted, which was all three, the jumping, dressage, and eventing, all three disciplines. And by that point, or someone like Noel grew up, she was born, it already existed. So we didn't have anything like that. So for us, Pony Club, and then if finding dressage instructors was not easy. We did fortunately have some, and Lendon Gray and more her sister Marshall Gray came and taught at our Pony Club. But mostly Marshall. Lendon came, I think, once or twice. Kathy Conley came frequently. But they also came from the more of an eventing background and that sort of dressage. So we really didn't have a lot that way. So for me, when at my age, I really almost had to go to Germany to delve into it more. But it's changed a lot, and I think. I'll let Noel talk, because she came up more through our system, obviously, and then a little bit about the European systems that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, when I was kind of starting my career, really, when I was 18, 19 years old, there was still a little bit of the holdover of you have to go to Europe to be a good rider. And I remember my dad and I talking a lot, and me feeling insecure about the fact that I, hadn't gone to Europe, and should I go to Europe? And I think we decided that wasn't really the right path for me, that maybe I didn't need that, but also that we had at that point, now we're talking kind of early mid 2000s, we had quality enough people in the US that you didn't need to go to Europe to have good instruction. The one thing at the time was that you may be in a barn in Europe, you might get the time in the saddle on quality horses, and that part is important. But again, we didn't feel that was really necessary. And I think maybe 5 to 10 years prior to that, maybe even in the 90s and maybe around 2000, you maybe still had to. But by the time I started to really come up, it wasn't necessary. And I think my generation of riders has now proved that. Adrienne Lyle didn't go to Europe, right? She stayed, I think, in the US. And so, I think there are several that are kind of my age, maybe a little older, a little younger, who didn't spend extensive time in Europe, and that's not necessary anymore. So that's one thing that's different. And you mentioned young riders. It's funny, I've had a couple of kids ride with me in the last couple of years, and I've said to them, look, you guys, like, I sound like an old person now, but you guys have things that we didn't have. When I was riding Peak L, I went to a private school. Even when my dad was on Roche, I went to private school. And my parents looked for schools that would allow me to be out of the classroom, because the public school, if you missed 5 days of school, you'd be held for after grade. And I went to Germany with my dad in 2001 when he took Roche over. I was there with him for 2 or 3 months. And, most schools wouldn't allow that. Well, now today, kids today get to do online school. So that's not a problem. Like, I had to haul all my textbooks everywhere and email my professors or my teachers. And in high school, that was a little bit tricky, trying to navigate flying down on the weekends to ride and compete. And now kids can kind of take a little more time and can kind of customizing the word I'm looking for. Can't think of it. But, you can really create your own structure for education. And I think the kids are really lucky. And now you have the European tour. I didn't have that. There's a lot of things now that I didn't even have. And I was lucky that I had I had juniors, I had young riders. There were things that I had that I was very lucky compared to generations prior.
And I know, George, you had mentioned that, your perspective on the international comparison to what
so I think one of the things that we've tried to do from an organization, whether it's the USEF or USDF, is really try to form to create the different divisions and some using the FEI division. So, we have of course the young riders, we have the juniors, and then we added the ponies. And then I was in Europe it was probably around 2015 or 16 when I watched the children's competition at a competition called Future Champions in Germany, and which is a huge competition of dressage and jumping for just youth, just young riders and juniors, ponies and children. So I watched the children's class, and it struck me that is really what we needed in this country to start, because and then I looked in the rule book, the FEI rule book, and outside of Western Europe, children can ride horses or ponies. In Europe, they have to ride horses, but it's the fact that in North America you can ride ponies really opened it up for the US, that basically a young person, a child, can ride whatever, whether it's their mother's horse, their older sister's pony, or younger sister's pony, whatever. So that it's, having to find the right horse wasn't as crucial, or finding a good dressage pony wasn't as crucial. And then more recently, the whole judging system has changed under the children's, in that there is a quality score and a technical score. So the judge on the long side judges the quality, and the judge on the short side judges the technical. So that then the gates and that aspect of it play less of a role, and it's much more about the effectiveness of the rider, their use of aids, their understanding of the movements, and that type of thing. So I think it's become a very good way to do it. And some of these other countries, Denmark has a very good program. Germany, of course, has a very good program. And they have the riding schools, and they have ways of introducing young people to it and then bringing them up through. And far more instructors per square mile than in this country. We'll never be able to have what they have that way as far as the whole country. And so I think sort of on that, to me, one of the reasons why the NAYC is so crucial to us, and why I think it needs to be kept going, is that it forces the USDF and the USEF to look at the country in the regions So that if we have the 9 regions, and if 9 regions can send a team, that means we have to help each region develop their youth. And that means that no part of the country really is being left forgotten. And our good riders can come from anywhere in the country, of course. And so that is crucial. I think without it, we could become a little bit Florida and California based and not be not so much.
That was one of the other questions. I don't want to, I know there's questions around, actual skill building and, really developing riding skills, but there's one other, kind of popularly asked question about the system, just generally speaking. Curious about the greatest amount of impact that someone who's not currently involved with a young rider, if you have, you're just a person who loves dressage and hopes that we do better, how, what are some levers that you can do to help the young riders today kind of get, a little leg up as they develop?
Well, I think that's a tough question. And one is, obviously finding quality instruction is probably one of the biggest challenges all around, right? And I think quality instruction is crucial. However, I think the people that actually start the youth on the horses are really the heroes in a lot of ways. They whether they're able to attract them, they bring them into the sport, and the amount of time that they give to develop them, and maybe they can't move them up to, whether it's up to juniors or up to young riders, doesn't take away from their importance in the sport. So I think that those that can just sort of generate interest and enthusiasm and can sort of help to give sound basics and foundations are crucial. With this part of this discussion, it's very important to mention that Dressage for Kids does so much that way. And I think one of the things that they do are able to do is the donation of the horses and be able to have horses go to some of the kids. And I think that has had a huge impact. And we had one of the Kayla Kadlebeck from Virginia area was with us on one of the European tours with one of the horses that had been donated, and she came in, I think, 3rd in Compiègne at the CDIY, her first time competing in Europe. And I immediately wrote Landon and said, "Is this the first Dressage for Kids donated horse that's medaled in a CDIY in Europe with an American rider?" Because I think it says a lot about the program. So I think, they don't have to necessarily supply the horses, but there's so many different ways that I think that people who are interested in youth can help. But main thing is being encouraging and helping them direct them to the quality people they need to bring them along.
Yeah, I can't understate the encouragement. You have to show ground.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anybody telling a kid, great to see you here, good luck today, they just kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, the questions that are coming in.
Okay. Yeah.
Hot and heavy that we haven't gotten to yet. Skill building, the most important, how are we riding horses when we are kids? Please. So I think, the trick with the kid, there's a lot of questions around, how to better instruct kids who are simply too tiny to really effectively aid these, we oftentimes have these big, even if they're schoolmasters, it's not a delicate process sometimes for these kids' perspectives to ride. Do you have any recommendations around how to support that kind of physical challenge?
Yeah, well, you must have some ideas on that one. Huh?
I did a lot of lunch lessons, I think. And I was fortunate enough to have somebody who could long rein. So I was long reined a lot, which I think I thought about this recently, actually, because I was thinking about, I have a couple of little difficult horses right now, and thinking about the fact that, like I said, I kind of made my career around problem horses. And usually I don't like it when you have a young trainer who comes out and they're like, yeah, I'm great because I trained my own horse and I didn't have a fancy schoolmaster to ride at Young Riders. It's a self-trained horse. And I kind of think, yeah, I think that horse might have a lot of holes. it's a great thing for that somebody can't self-train a horse, but I think the importance of a schoolmaster cannot be understated. You know, they're so crucial. You have to feel, I mean, how are you supposed to teach a pirouette if you haven't actually felt what a pirouette is supposed to feel like, right? So anyway, so I was thinking about this and I thought like, well, you know, why did I do well with the problem horses? Well, I did have schoolmasters. Like I said, they were just very early on. And anyway, I again was fortunate enough to have that where I had somebody who could long ride me and feel that. And I don't know that there are a lot of people in this country who can do that, but that was very helpful. So I think that was crucial in my development. And then like I said, I think I spent a lot of time on the lunge line. My mom likes to do lunge lessons. I think I don't know if she still tortures people, but she does still torture people with the long lines. And then I think for me, one of the other things was just having a pony and going off into the woods and the steeplechase and wherever I was and not being in the arena all the time, getting in trouble out there, getting yelled at for, you know, riding my pony for an hour and a half on the steeplechase course. But I think that taught me a lot. You know, I'm not afraid to ride forward. Or sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say just change it a little bit around, because I also think that well, Noel mentions lunge line lessons and whatnot, but developing a good, regardless of the size of the child, that they have the balance, that they have the stability they need. And then, of course, from the training point of view, if you will, the horse needs to be relatively sensitive, right, and responsive to leg gaze or to the hand, or to listen to the half halts. And I think with that, if you're looking for the right pony horse for a smaller child, the balance, the natural balance of the horse is something I would really take into consideration. Because if it's a very big horse that's out of balance, it's going to be even hard for us to, sometimes to keep them in balance or to balance them. And I think that, to me, balance is probably one of the most crucial things. And of course, the balance, and here I'm referring to the balance of the horse, but it's also crucial for the rider and to have that core, so they core strength, a solid seat, so they can be effective. But I do you know, if it needs to be also a suitable horse for the rider. I think that's important. We sometimes had Noel on not so suitable horses sometimes, I think, but yes, but I think it is important that the horse is suitable for the rider. Yeah.
I will say, building on that a little bit, like I have 2 horses in the barn right now that are kind of schoolmaster types, right? They're both FEI horses. And one of them, you know, I've had working students come through and, you know, we've said, oh, you know, should we put a working student on this and have this one teach them? And I actually said, no, they're both very good boys. They're not dangerous or anything, but I felt that the one particularly, he's tricky enough to ride. He doesn't look like it. He's, again, good boy, he does his job, but he's tricky enough to ride that I felt that he would actually teach the rider bad habits. And so I said, no, I don't want to use him as a schoolmaster. Yeah, sure, you can sit on him here and there, but I didn't want to give the ride to the working students, because I wanted them to learn, you know, not to hang on the horses and not to, you know, do this and do that, like to ride the horse really through. And if it's a horse that, oh, you know, you have to really twist your body around to get the changes, or you kind of have to finagle it like this to get the half pass, or, you know, when you're doing stuff like that, what are you teaching the rider? You're not really teaching them correctly. So I think part of the balance is, you know, the importance of balance is also that they truly, like you said, they're sensitive, they understand the aids, they can do a proper half pass. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it should be correct.
Thank you. Keep forgetting to say thank you, Dr. It's all been really incredible. What other questions, you know, coming in, kind of the foundation, like, a lot of questions for the top 3, you know, most important foundations to really, you know, master as a young rider before moving on to the, you know, the fancier things, recommendations for things like that, or little tips and tricks that you've learned that you'd like to pass along, nuggets of wisdom or anything like that?
Well, I think it's so much of it boils down to the fundamentals of the basics. You know, learning a correct seat, learning to be able to move with the horse, and stay in balance with the horse is crucial. But I think developing the basic skills, in other words, for me, you know, just a simple thing of riding a 20-meter circle and be able to have the correct bend, to have the consistency of the line. And one thing I like to do, well, in a lesson, because then they're being watched, is to have them ride a 20-meter circle with their eyes closed, so that they really develop the feel of the line through their body and through feeling how the horse moves, right, in the bend of the horse, so that they have that sense of consistency. Because some of those most basic movements like that is really what surrounds the horse, with the inside aids and outside aids. And if the horse is truly surrounded and stays consistent in its bend, it stays consistent on its line, it also has to stay consistent in its tempo. So I think the tempo, learning the proper tempo for the horse and where it works best is also important. And then, as everybody always says, good transitions, right? And many good transitions. But I think sometimes you want to be able to just ride around the arena. You know, one thing we had to do when I was in Germany, and it was a true riding school situation, we had to go around the arena with the horse on the bit, not do anything fancy. We couldn't do shoulder ins or leg yieldings to get the horse on the bit. We had to be able to just ride around the arena with the horse on the bit, stay in a tempo, and the instructor would walk away and go back into the stable for something, and then come back and expect to see the horse going exactly the same way. So you learn how to keep the horse really on your aids without necessarily being totally dependent on exercises to keep the horse there. Then I think you learn that the exercises really enhance everything, but they don't. But if you need it just for the basic, then things are not established. And that doesn't, and saying that, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do a leg yielding or turn the forehand or turn the haunches to help at times. But if you're totally dependent on that, then you don't really have the ability to just surround the horse. And one of the things that Egon von Neindorf had said, which really stuck with me, is that a well-trained dressage horse should be comfortable to ride across the countryside. He said cross country, but across the countryside. So in other words, it's comfortable, but it's efficient in its way of moving. And you could stay with it for longer periods of time because it is comfortable and the horse moves efficiently. And I think that's sort of what you want to be thinking about when you have a good, it has to be active, it has to cover ground, it has to get you where you want to go, but it also needs to be comfortable and consistent in the way of going. So those to me are the sort of the fundamentals that you really want to develop.
I like that you mentioned that about the 20-meter circle, because I think you probably are annoyed with me saying this already, and everyone in my barn is probably very annoyed, but that is my big thing with the young horses, is that, you know, I say, okay, if he can't walk, trot, canter 20-meter circle on the lunge line, a proper circle, not with me running behind him all around, me standing there and him going around me, then how is he going to be able to do it with me on him? And if he can't do it, you know, accepting a little bit of contact, how on earth are we going to go around the whole arena and do serpentines and, you know, training level and then leg yields and everything? You know, that 20-meter circle is so crucial. And even, I think, for the development of the rider, but then also the development of the horse.
Yeah. No, I think that the circles in general, 20-meter circles, and that kind of accuracy and understanding the reason for the accuracy is important, because, you know, otherwise you write a test and the judge says circle not round and you're like, well, who really cares? But it does make a huge difference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I tell you, I think the judge is just nitpicky, but it makes a big difference in your ability to have the horse surrounded and balance, right? I always go back to balance.
Yeah.
It's funny that this is not the first time this year in these webinars that the 20-meter circles with your eyes closed has come up.
Oh,
So.
really? Oh, interesting. Yeah.
The collective groan of, oh no, we're really gonna have to learn this, aren't we?
Well, I have to say, years ago with the skating in the Olympics, they used to show all the mandatory things that they had to do. And I remember that as watching it, thinking that they had to skate a perfect circle backward without looking. And then that's where it sort of struck me that we should be able to do the same thing, right? We have to feel the line in a way, right? Yeah.
And you mentioned Egon again, just a quick question that, are you seeing a lot of the young riders' exposure to training reflecting that the classical training still, present day, or are you seeing kind of a variety of backgrounds presenting in the ring for the young riders that show up at the young rider events?
I think there are two things on that. I think that the dressage seat medal, the equitation type classes that we do, have had a big impact on those that we see coming to the festival champions in Chicago. I think the position, the seat is so much better than it was. It's the best. I think it's the best it's ever been. So I think in that way, you're seeing some of the best riding, and the riders in general have a good feel. I think what I always worry about is, do people just do, and especially the young people, but it could be anybody, do they just ride the movements that are required in the test because they're required in the test? Or do they realize their importance as training exercises in the development of the horse? And I that's always one of my big concerns. And I think one of the things that what Noel didn't mention, but Noel, when I was at Temple, we did at least 10 years of judges forums, where in those days of forums, the judges all came, and the judges sat on one side, a set of bleachers, and on the other side were sometimes auditors, and we had 4 or 5 horses in the arena, and they'd ask for a shoulder in, and one horse would do it one after the other, and there'd be the discussion and the marks. And Noel sort of grew up running the microphone between the judges on that. So I think that exposure for her was a huge thing. And I think Noel, from what my observation, was always fascinated by the principles or the theory behind dressage, as well as just sort of knowing the sort of how to write a test just so you can score well. Yeah.
Okay. No, I've always enjoyed theory. I was actually a politics. I had 3 majors in college, but I was a politics major, and my focus was on theory. I like theory. My other majors were psychology and philosophy. Philosophy is a lot of theory. But he brings up the judges forums, which I think ties into, he said, you're always a little bit worried that are people riding the movements because they're required in the test, or are they understanding that they actually are part of developing the horse? And I will say, forgot to mention, so I am a USEF judge. I'm a small R. I'm starting to go for my large R. And one thing I tell everybody, professionals, young riders, just amateurs that maybe just want to enjoy the sport and ride on the weekends, not even really serious competitive amateurs, is that I think it's really important to attend the L program. In Germany, you have the whole rider system, all of that, where there's a very theoretical development of a rider. And we don't have that here. And I don't think it's really feasible with the size of our country. But the one thing that we do have is the L program, which really is I think a classroom fundamentals on dressage in the sport, or the development of the horse, and then of course on judging, and then the practical judging. But the L program does a really great job of discussing the training scale. And then what it really shows you is that the USEF tests are developed in a way to help guide the training of your horse. And so if you really read your test, if you read the purpose at the top, and you read the objectives of each movement, and you look at more than just the A down center line, X halt salute part, you look at all of it and you follow it, then if you follow it up the levels, you end up with a horse prepared for pre-St. George. And you can do that on your own without a really good instructor, if you just kind of follow the little textbook. And so I think for hopefully people who have attended the L program, and hopefully people who do attend it, then hopefully they are not just riding the movement because it's required in the test. Hopefully they understand, but I would recommend to everybody that you attend the Yale program, even as an auditor.
That's actually kind of feeds to one of the other questions I had gotten prior to the session. One of our members, just noting that, both of you have really prolific careers in volunteerism and kind of the dedication and service to the industry. Do you feel that helped in any way your education as a young rider developing, to see kind of behind the scenes and understand more the process of why things are the way they are? Do you feel it made a better rider?
Absolutely. A better rider, a better trainer, a better coach, a better competitor. I mean, I think it's silly for somebody to compete and not really know what the test is asking of you or what the judge is judging. I see it happen all the time where you have competitors complain about things, and sometimes it's my students, and that's where they come to me and I actually know and can tell them, they complain about something and I'm like, well, this is what the judge is looking for, and this is how you judge. But if you want to be a competitor and you really are serious about competing, I think it's different if you just kind of want to have fun and for the experience. But if you're really serious about competing, then you need to know what they're judging. Like, it's silly to go down center line and not know how the judge is coming to their score or what it is that they're looking for. You ride a shoulder in and you're kind of like, okay, it's supposed to have bend and on 3 tracks, but do you know what else you need there? Like, you need to know that. So yeah, I think it absolutely has helped, really has helped.
I do have a specific question. One of our members is asking, and parent of a young rider living on an island, difficult for her daughter to have access to a schoolmaster and is just starting her mare all the way up at I-1. Do you recommend that she find and lease a horse? Is there going to be holes in her training? How, at this point, how vital is this kind of?
One of the beauties of this day and age, and it certainly was accelerated due to COVID, is the virtual learning and virtual lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And in that situation where you're on an island and you're, I'm going to say stuck, but maybe not really stuck, but it's difficult to get off. It's difficult to go play. I would definitely try to set up some virtual lessons and have that, at least that kind of observation. If it's possible from time to time, or through that, you may have opportunities to go and at least ride a schoolmaster or ride a horse through whomever you're working with, and be able to sit on one of their horses. That may be better, further along in the training. And I think, as Noel already touched on, I mean, a movement like a half pirouette or canter pirouette, it's much easier when the rider has experienced on a schoolmaster in trying to teach their own horse. So kudos to bringing the horse up to Prix St. George and I-1. But that's, as I said, I would definitely look into the virtual, see if you can do virtual lessons. Yeah.
I will say, I made my comment about, being a little snarky about people who really trainers who pride themselves on not having ridden schoolmasters. But I say that knowing that not everybody has access to a schoolmaster. My little snarkiness is more annoyed when people put down those riders who develop themselves on schoolmasters, because I think that undermines the importance of the schoolmaster. But again, realistically, in this country, we just don't have as many horses. We're not as many dressage horses, the upper level dressage horses, we're not as close together. So you might not have the access to them. And I think that's absolutely fine. You make do with what you can. And like he said, if you can go maybe ride one once or twice, great. And if you can do it on your own, that's also wonderful. And there's nothing I don't want to take away from doing it on your own. I think that's, the first horse that I competed in Grand Prix is one that I trained. And so in a way, I didn't compete at Grand Prix Schoolmaster. In a way, I wish I would have, because that poor horse had holes, and the next one did, I think, was a lot better. The holes outside of the ring, there weren't many holes outside the ring, but putting the test together is very different than, getting to ride a line of ones and then go down the long side and fix your canter and then come back and go do something. So anyway.
Thank you. We've got another question. This one pops up periodically. If you could go back, both of you, and catch yourself as a young rider and give the one sentence or the one piece of advice you wish someone had said to you earlier, what would that be?
I'm letting you go first.
Yeah, well, the first thing that comes to my mind is listen to your teachers. It's a very good question, because I think one of the things I have learned is to be more open-minded as I go along. And when you're young, it's very easy to you can be you're very impressionable, and it's very easy to be sort of taken in by thinking that the person you work with is the one and only that really knows everything about it. And I think sort of an openness and learning from others, willingness to learn from others, is really kind of crucial. And I think the other thing you sort of, as you get older, you learn that you learn what you don't know. But you can't really say that to a young person, because you only learn it by getting older. Then you learn that how much you really don't know. So I think that I would have to just leave it that you have to stay very, very open and open to ideas. And yeah.
I want to build on that, but I think I probably would have liked somebody to, I don't know that I would say tell me, because I think people probably did tell me, but somehow get through to me to not be so tough on myself. I think I was very, very hard on myself, and there were a lot of tears shed and there was a lot of comparing, well, so-and-so's doing this and they didn't go to college. They went, straight away riding. And we've had some very serious conversations where it was, you will be okay. You will be okay. You made the right decision for yourself. But I would have liked to, or would wish that somebody could have gotten through to me to not be so hard on myself and maybe be a little more confident in my abilities or my potential. Although young people do tend to be pretty confident and cocky, but a little more stay comfortable. Yeah.
I think Noel brings up a very, very good point, though. You really do have to realize you're paving your own way, that you can't look at your peers and think, well, how they're already competing Grand Prix, or poor Noel went through it. Suddenly we had a period. It used to be our team members were all older, and now suddenly they're younger, right? I think that's actually a product of what a good program, the Young Rider program, and whether they actually participated in it, they still benefited from its existence. But I think what Noel's referred to, when you turn 30, say, and you see that the team 1 year around that time, there were a number of 28 to 32-year-olds that were doing things internationally, and it suddenly becomes a very difficult time. But for Noel, it could be very tough. And I think there's so many reasons why it wasn't the right time for her, or right, because you don't necessarily have the horse, or whatever the opportunity, but it's not just the opportunity. It is opportunities, but you may not be able to have the horse. It doesn't necessarily have to do with your skill as a rider or a trainer, just that the opportunities aren't there and it's not the right time. And I think that's very important for people. And when we talk about our youth programs, yes, it's great because it's a step, you can go so let's say you go from children to juniors to young riders to U25, and then you're in the senior ranks. And then some people get become afraid that if they skip, maybe they don't have a young rider horse, so maybe they never got to young riders. Does that mean they're not going to make it to U25? No, of course, it doesn't necessarily affect it, right? Yeah, so they should never worry that, oh, geez, I wasn't able to do young riders, I have to give up because I'm never going to get to U25. That's not the case at all. It's really the grit and the determination and willing to work through it, and having a goal, I think, is the most important thing. And then you can get through it, and it will come at your own time. I mean, I didn't compete internationally until I was in my late 40s. So
yeah, I actually, conversation I was referring to was when riders my age, they were I think getting either jobs as full-time riders or had their own training stables filled with training horses, and I was still cleaning stalls. So I must have been 22 or 23.
Yeah.
But those are both times when you do it. I look now and I see the team riders are my age or younger. But then at the same time, Sabine is in her 40s, her first Olympics. So it is your own timeline. But going back to the open-mindedness thing, one of the things that I do tell my working students or kids that I work with is all the time, they come into my barn and I say, look, this is how we do it. This is how it works for this, not just for me, but for this barn, this situation. This is how things work. I'm open to ideas, like give it a chance, see, if you have an idea, great, I'll listen to it. Chances are I probably already tried it. It might not work out. And what you need to do is you need to look at this and say, hey, I really like this. This works. Or I really don't like this. I don't feel this works. And you can take that. And when you go onto your own barn, then you have something to build from. You don't have to do it exactly my way. You don't have to look at everything I do and say that is all sucks. It's all awful. But every single barn that I walk into, I look at, and even now, like I go, I don't know, look at a sales horse, or I go visit somebody, I kind of see like, oh, how's their tack room set up? How is this set up? How is their day set up? I text my friends all the time. I'm like, hey, how do you do this? And just kind of pull from everybody and see, again, what works, what doesn't work. And it's the same with the riding and the training. I learned, of course, when you're 19, 20, you think that what you come from, you're one person and your system is the best. But, by the time I was 24, 25, and I was in California working for NEDA, I learned that it doesn't matter if this is the way you want to ride, you're riding for somebody else, and you have to ride the horses the way they want them ridden. And when you're working for another trainer, you do what they want. And when you have your own barn, you can do what you want. And I think that was very important too, is to kind of learn to be open-minded like that.
That's a great perspective. Thank you. There's a little bit of a segue there to the open-mindedness, and also that angst about the timing and the success. Parents who also support their young riders pursuing higher education. Could you speak to, your 3 different degrees, lots of different experiences? Do you find that it also relates to the equine industry? Do you have any regrets for that at all?
No, I don't regret college at all. I went to college in person, lived in the dorms, lived on campus. I was a cheerleader. I played a club water polo. Like I very much participated in the college life, and I don't regret it. And I tell everybody you need to do it. It teaches you, I think, independence. There's a certain amount of maturity, and of course, it's not to disparage people who didn't have the opportunity. I was very fortunate in having that opportunity. Not everybody does, and not everybody takes that path. But I do think it's really important. I think if you really pay attention, you watch interviews with people, you can tell who went to college and who didn't. At least in the younger generations, maybe people when, like my dad's more experienced now at speaking, you can't tell. But people who are younger, you can kind of see that maybe they're not as articulate. In college, you learn how to be articulate. You have to write papers and you have to express yourself. You have to formulate arguments, and it becomes very helpful when trying to encourage a client that, yes, your horse does need this veterinary, procedure done, or this treatment, and here are the reasons why. It teaches you how to network, how to talk to people, how to go to dinner with your number one client and her husband who really hates horses and horse people, and being able to, win them over because you can have a discussion about something other than horses. And guess what? The husband's the one who pays the bills. So you kind of like want him to maybe like horses and horse people a little bit. I think dad of when we went to Young Horse, and my client's husband was like, "Oh, I guess it's not that bad."
I know. Now I was trying to figure out who you were talking about, but I know who you're talking
exactly.
about. And not all like that by any means.
No, but that does.
But there is that occasion. There is that occasion. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think college is crucial. And so my degrees, like I said, were psychology, philosophy, and politics. And then I minored in English. My focus on English was on writing. I figured that, watching my parents, they write a lot of articles, they write a lot of speeches. I probably should learn how to write well. I am not really good at making decisions, so I couldn't decide on a major, so I just went with all of them. And I think that they help me, I think, handle people, or at least be able to read people. A lot of my people handling skills really come from my parents and me, calling them going, well, how do I handle this? What do I do? But at least I think my degrees help me gain insight into people. So yeah, college is amazing.
Very helpful. Thank you. I know we're at time, but just one final little, as the man in charge of the country right now, thoughts on how expensive the horses are now. It's kind of difficult to get the top horse, systemically, personally, young rider related or otherwise. Your thoughts on that challenge?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one, because in some ways it's very unfortunate that it's gone to that degree. I still think there are some that you can find. It's very, very difficult. I agree, and I certainly sympathize. That's why we have one horse, an older horse now that's been with us for a lot of years. Because
well, speak for yourself.
Well, you have one now too. That's right. Yeah. I forgot. but but yeah, and quite honestly, they're out of my price range. That is for sure. And I think, not to feel sorry for professionals, but they're out of a lot of professionals' price range, and so and obviously they're out of a lot of people's price range, the very good ones. But I still think there are some out there. There's a way that you can still ride, you can still have fun. But sometimes it is rather discouraging when you look at these prices. And I go back to what I mentioned about the Dressage for Kids program for the horses, because I think as these prices go up, that programs, that's the only one I know like that. I was going to say programs like that, but that's the only one I know of. But that type of program becomes so valuable, so crucial.
When we had Carl Hester up for the symposium, and he made a comment too, well, I certainly can't afford any of these horses.
Yeah. And if he can, I certainly can.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it is. I mean, it is. When you think of it as a professional, then it's really, yeah. Because we don't do horse sales, and so without horse sales,
Yeah, one of those things
that's not
important.
Yeah.
But
Noel, of course, has to do horse sales with the farm, with the breeding farm, but that's not,
But that is, Dad, why you encouraged me to take the opportunity with my young one, right?
Yes, yeah. Because I do think with young, you can get younger horses for more reasonable, but it's so.
So I now have a 2 coming 3-year-old that became mine at 2. And because there's no way that once he's under saddle and once the horse is really going, no, I couldn't afford a horse of this quality. And this, I think as a young professional, if the opportunity arises and you can start them, or you have somebody who you can afford to have start them, in some ways it's the best way to do it. I wouldn't recommend more than one because they get a little expensive. But now I don't have to worry about an owner saying, okay, well, I want to go to this show, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, or no, we can't do this. I think having one of your own allows you to make some of those decisions or take the pressure off. If I look at him and I say, yeah, I don't want to start him as a 3-year-old, I want to start him as a 4-year-old, then I can do that because that's my call. On the flip side, owning him then means that I'm the one paying for the shows. And if he does pan out and goes to more than just local shows, that's going to get pricey pretty quickly. And I don't know that I can afford that. So there is a pro, I think, to investing young, but they are a little pricey.
Yeah, and I think just on that, I sometimes get questions from younger professionals. I went the route of working for most of my life, working for farms. In my professional career, I ended up working for 3 different farms. And primarily for that exact reason, because I would not have been able to afford a lot of the horses that I was able to compete. So
That's why I'm working for somebody else right now too. I never have thought I never would, and now I am, but I'm on amazing horses I could only dream of being able to be on all day long. So he was right to go that route.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much. We're really, really very thankful for your time, and lots of thank yous coming in the chat. And there's a lot of comments that I didn't take the time to mention that was supporting what you were saying, agreement with the L program and all of those things. So really very appreciative for the time you took to talk to us and give us kind of a peek into what's out there.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for having us. It's been fun.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Have great nights, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.